After studying this module, you shall be able to define various constructs related to psychological acculturation, understand the concepts of social cognition, stigmatization, social identity, and cultural competence. Infer the role of these concepts in the process of acculturation. As you have read in the previous chapter, over the decades, different perspectives of the acculturation process have emerged and have been studied. Studies indicate that psychologists have followed a static approach to understand intergroup relations. There have been limited studies that inquire the motivations of an individual who plans to acculturate. According to Padilla and Perez in 2003, it is necessary to understand the cause and motivation behind acculturation, since this can potentially impact the social cognition of the individuals undergoing acculturation. The concept of acculturation has been approached not only from a psychological perspective, but anthropological and sociological perspectives as well. In this chapter, some of the present acculturation constructs will be elaborated upon. Acculturation from a new perspective. Looking back at the earlier theories of acculturation, hardly any one of them seemed to lay emphasis on certain key aspects such as individual differences and personality traits that tend to impact the acculturation process. None of the proposed models have been able to pinpoint reasons for the difference among people in terms of the impact of cultural change on an individual, ways of adapting to a new culture, readiness to acculturate, and so on. This new perspective shall help us understand some of the important concepts underlying acculturation. These are social cognition, cultural competence, social identity, and social stigma. Social cognition. Social cognition focuses on the ways in which an individual makes use of the social information about other people he or she gathers through the process of receiving, storing, and analyzing. This information comes to use while one interacts with people in varied social settings. For example, a woman has been called for a job interview. Not only will she be anxious about the impression she will form on the interview committee's minds, but also the kind of impact they would have on her. Her anxiety would also be fueled by the uncertainty that their perceptions about her as a candidate might shape up the nature and sequence of questions they shoot at her. In fact, Fiske and Taylor in 1991 have defined social cognition as how ordinarily people think about people and how they think about people. Therefore, a considerable amount of time and energy is invested by people in their interactions with others each day, and double the time is invested on comprehending and delving on the information gathered by them. In terms of acculturation and cultural differences, social cognition plays a pivotal role. Ziva Kunda in 1999, in her publication Social Cognition: Making Sense of People, wrote one of the cornerstones of social cognition theory, and research is that different individuals may understand the same situation quite differently if they view it through the lenses of different knowledge structures, goals, and feelings. Kitayama and his colleagues in 1997 reasoned that different cultures may give rise to different collective, culturally shared ways of constructing, defining, and extracting meaning from situations. Similar situations may therefore carry different meaning in different cultures. As individuals follow the diktats of their respective cultures, fulfilling the culturally dictated patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior, they ultimately reinforce the very culture that had given rise to these patterns in the first place. As you think and act in accordance with your culture, you support and reproduce it. A research study was conducted by Robert W. Lent from University of Maryland, College Park in 2011 on social cognition and acculturation predictors of the college adjustment of Asian Americans, which sought to understand the underlying factors of adjustment and cultural differences in social cognitive processes. Findings of the study showed differences in the utilization of concept of self-efficacy and social support. The results after qualitative and quantitative analysis indicated that social support is an integral element in the context of college adjustment of Asian Americans. It also suggested that cultural variables such as acculturation are indirectly related to Asian Americans' college adjustment via their levels of self-efficacy, the social support received and perceived, as well as their progress towards their goals. In another study conducted by Ari W. Kruglansky et al. In 2004 on social cognition of immigrants' acculturation, effects of the need for closure and the reference group at entry, the hypothesis tested the notion whether the immigrants' culturation to the host culture was determined by their need for cognitive closure and the reference group formed by them when they set foot into the new culture. The study revealed consistent results across 3 immigrant sample cultures: Italian, Polish, and Croatian immigrants. The results indicated that when immigrants are exposed to close social relations with co-ethnics, they tend to develop a higher need for closure, which ultimately weakens their tendency to assimilate into the new culture. This makes them hold on to their culture of origin firmly. In contrast, if the immigrants are exposed to close social relations with the locals or the people of the host country or culture, they tend to develop a stronger tendency to accept the new culture, and this consequently weakens their hold on their culture of origin. Cultural competence. Cultural competence refers to the ability of an individual to effectively interact with different kinds of people from diverse cultural and socio-cultural economic backgrounds. Immigrants who undergo cultural transitions after they move to a different country or culture for academic, professional, or personal purposes tend to face a lot of pressure and from the host culture's societal norms. They need to learn to cope up with these pressures in order to ensure an overall sense of positive development and well-being by establishing a sense of congruency with the thoughts, customs, beliefs, language, etc. of the new culture. This is carried out by initiatives to make sense of their social environment, forming non-judgmental perceptions and opinions, and then integrating them with their ways of life. According to researchers, pragmatism and cultural competence play a huge role in lives of acculturating individuals. According to Fiske and Taylor in 1991, motivated tactician is a terminology used to describe social perceivers. When there are many practical cognitive tactics at the disposal of these people, they pick and choose the one which is the most aligned to their motives, needs, and goals. This is usually influenced by the nature of social situation they are in and the extent of motivation, either intrinsically or extrinsically. People tend to emphasize primarily on their pragmatic motives and tend to think with less effort when their knowledge goals are satisfied. Social identity. Social identity is a person's sense of who they are as an individual entity in the society. People form perceptions about themselves and tend to categorize them based on that. According to Tajfel and Turner in 1986, the different kinds of groups people usually belong to, for example, sports teams, family, class, friends, etc., are an important source of determinants to the development of a sense of self-esteem and pride. These groups bring about a sense of belongingness among individuals. For example, a boy may identify himself as a footballer who is very popular in his state, a male, a Christian, and so on. The social identity theory of Tajfel and Turner emphasizes on the fact that a person's behavior reflects the kind of groups, organizations, cultures one is part of, and how he or she identifies with them helps shape their identity in the society. Cultural competencies play a large role in this theory as a collective sense of membership with a group not only influences an individual's thoughts and subsequent behaviors, but also frequently determines them. Therefore, the fact that people form social cognitions depending on their associations or memberships with groups, organizations, and cultures influences their daily patterns of behavior and emotions. For instance, if an immigrant in the United Kingdom sees himself or herself as being dark-skinned or having a strong Indian accent while speaking English, and this has a negative connotation attached to it, he or she will face difficulties in undergoing the process of acculturation. The person will continue to believe that such negative views will persist regardless of them being competent enough to be a part of the host or dominant culture. According to Brewer 1991, the process of social identification rests upon two important motives, which are the need to belong and the need to be unique or different. As long as an individual identifies himself or herself with aspects such as religion, nationality, an institution, etc., he or she will continue to experience satisfaction in terms of inclusion and differentiation. This means that an individual constantly tries to belong to a social group and simultaneously strives to be different and maintain his or her own uniqueness in order to establish a firm sense of social identity. Social stigma. Social stigma is harboring an extreme sense of negative views or emotions towards a person or a group on certain social grounds that are perceived by others and tend to distinguish them from other members of the society. For example, people have a social stigma and prejudices towards people with HIV or those suffering from AIDS. Their negative perceptions consequently impact their behavior towards people. It has often been noted that when others' reactions begin to influence an individual's behavior and identity, he or she would try to control the inflow of those reactions by intelligently revealing only relevant and socially acceptable aspects about themselves. According to Crocker, Major and Steele in 1998, social stigma is a function of having an attribute that conveys a devalued social identity in a particular context, and the possession of a particular attribute might lead individuals to be stigmatized in one context but not in another. There are various attributes that lead to stigmatization, such as accented speech, skin color, wearing a religious piece of clothing like a burqa or turban, gender, homosexuality, a mental disorder, and so on. These attributes are usually associated with minority groups and those who do not occupy the upper half of the social hierarchy. Stigmatization is less when there is a high social standing and immense power of the group. This results in a decreased sense of vulnerability to social stigma. It is important to remember that stigmas that are visible, such as race, certain physical and mental disorders, handicaps, accent or severe cases of malnourishment due to poverty. These can't be hidden from others and often get subjected to derogatory remarks and disrespectful behavior. Thus, for such people, the stigma tends to form a mental representation or schema, and people use it and form false perceptions about them. For example, people who are dark-skinned may in reality be second or third generation Americans, but in the eyes of the dominant members of the society in America, they will be viewed as Arabs or from the Middle East and could be subjected to discriminatory treatment. People with stigmas, which can be concealed from the world to a considerable extent, for instance, certain religious and ethnicities, for this reason, they are able to freely form relations with people of different cultures and develop a strong sense of social identity. However, they are aware of the fact that they are posed by the threat of being stigmatized if and when their attributes get revealed. Due to this, many would try to monitor their daily behavior in terms of their dressing styles, how they speak, and their non-verbal mannerisms, and so on. Summary. Over the recent years, research has led to the emergence of a new perspective that lays emphasis on the role of social cognition, social identity, cultural competence, and social stigma in the process of acculturation. Social cognitions refers to the ways in which people form thoughts and perceptions about others and themselves upon interactions in social settings. Individuals who are able to form positive relationships with people from different cultures are said to be culturally competent. The social identity of an individual shapes up as a result of his perceptions about himself or herself and the associations formed with groups or institutions in the society. Social stigmatization is the process of forming stereotypes and prejudices towards individuals who are culturally or socially different from us. These stereotypes and prejudices influence our behavior in the long run.